The marble beneath your feet is still warm, not from sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, from blood. You're standing in what was once the throne room of the Byzantine emperors, where purple-born Caesars ruled for over a millennium. Now shattered mosaics crunch beneath Ottoman boots. Through smoke-darkened windows, Constantinople burns, a city that withstood barbarian hordes, Arab sieges, and even the treachery of crusader swords for 1100 years has been reduced to ash and screaming in a single morning. And in the center of this devastation, trembling, stands a girl. She's 15 years old. Her hands are blackened with kitchen soot, her hair chopped short and uneven in a desperate attempt at disguise. She wears the rough wool of a servant, but none of it matters now. They found her anyway, Princess Theodora Palaeologina, last daughter of Byzantium, last flower of a dying empire. Across from her, seated on a portable throne that still reeks of siege camps and gunpowder, sits the man who destroyed her world. Sultan Mehmed II is only 21 years old, but his dark eyes burn with something between triumph and cold calculation. His commanders stand behind him, arms crossed, waiting. They know what comes next. Everyone in this blood-soaked room knows what comes next. Islamic law is brutally clear about the fate of noble captives after a city taken by storm. 3 days of pillage. 3 days where everything and everyone belongs to the victors. The girl's breathing is shallow, rapid. She's trying desperately not to shake, not to show fear, but her body betrays her. The Sultan is silent, studying her like a chess piece whose value he's still determining. Outside these shattered walls, the screaming continues. But what Mehmed does in the next 72 hours, what he decides about this girl in this precise moment, will reveal something about conquest that neither side wanted history to remember. A decision so unexpected, so contrary to the rules of medieval warfare, that it was buried in dusty archives for centuries, lost deliberately in the propaganda of two empires who both needed simpler stories, cleaner narratives, easier villains. Because sometimes the most dangerous truth isn't about the brutality of war, it's about the mercy that follows. What do you do with the princess of a fallen empire when your men expect her as a prize? And why would the conqueror who just unleashed hell on her city make a choice that defied every rule, every expectation, every law of conquest? Before we cross that blood-stained threshold together, let me be direct with you. This kind of research, the type that challenges comfortable historical narratives and digs into the uncomfortable truths that empires tried to bury, survives only on your support. If these hidden stories matter to you, if you believe history deserves to be told completely, not conveniently, then hit that subscribe button now. It's what keeps us deep in forgotten archives, searching for the history that was never meant to be found. Now, back to May 29th, 1453. Back to the day the medieval world died and the modern age was born in blood and fire. 57 days earlier, in the spring of 1453, the world's oldest Christian empire is dying. And you can smell it in the air like rotting flowers, like hope turning to ash. Constantinople, the queen of cities, 11 centuries old, jewel of the Christian world. It survived the Huns when Rome herself fell into darkness. It survived wave after wave of Arab armies. It even survived the Crusaders who sacked it in 1204, Christians slaughtering Christians for gold and glory. Its walls, built by Emperor Theodosius in 413 AD, have never been breached by force. Until now, 80,000 Ottoman warriors surround the city like a noose tightening. 200 warships choke the Golden Horn, blocking any hope of relief from the sea. And on the hills overlooking those ancient walls, shapes that make even veterans cross themselves and whisper prayers. Cannons. One of them is 27 feet long, a mechanical monster designed by a Hungarian engineer named Orban. He came to Constantinople first, offering his services to the Byzantines. They couldn't afford him. So he crossed to the Ottoman camp and built them the weapon that would end empires. When it fires, the ground trembles 3 miles away. The stone balls weigh 1,200 pounds. They hit walls, that have stood for over 1,000 years, and the impact sounds like the world itself cracking open, like God's judgment made audible. Inside those crumbling walls, 7,000 defenders. Greeks, Venetians, Genoese, mercenaries and believers, men who have done the mathematics and know exactly how this ends. Church bells ring without stopping, their desperate clamor echoing through narrowing streets. Priests carry icons older than most kingdoms, ancient faces of Mary and Christ staring with golden eyes at the approaching doom, praying for miracles that aren't coming. Citizens barricade their doors because everyone knows the law, the brutal custom of siege warfare. After a city falls by force, by storm rather than negotiation, the victorious army gets 3 days. 3 days to take whatever they want. Property, treasure, people. 3 days of absolute license. In the great palace, behind walls within walls, lives what remains of the Palaiologos dynasty. Emperor Constantine XI is 48 years old, unmarried, childless. He knows with absolute certainty that he's going to die defending his capital. That's not doubt speaking, that's mathematical certainty, the grim arithmetic of siege warfare. But his extended family, cousins, nephews, distant relations clinging to the edges of imperial bloodlines, they're still here, still living in marble halls that echo too much now, in rooms too large for their diminished household. Among them is Theodora, 15 years old, educated in Greek classics and Latin grammar, fluent in Arabic, accomplished in music and theology. The kind of refined accomplishments that mean absolutely nothing when cannons are tearing your civilization apart stone by ancient stone. What she wants is impossible, for tomorrow to be like yesterday, for the cannons to fall silent, for the nightmare encircling her city to simply dissolve like morning mist. What she fears is specific, visceral, the terror that keeps her awake through bombardment-shattered nights, becoming one of the thousands of captives distributed like livestock after the city falls, sorted by age and beauty and usefulness, her noble blood making her more valuable, more desirable, more doomed. She doesn't know it yet, but in 57 days, she faced a 21-year-old conqueror in a blood-soaked throne room, and her survival will depend on something stranger than luck, more inexplicable than beauty or breeding. It will depend on the psychology of a young sultan trying to prove he is more than a warlord, trying to become something history has never seen before. Across those towering walls, in a silk pavilion lit by oil lamps, Sultan Mehmed II stares at maps and architectural drawings by candlelight. 21 years old and he can't sleep. He's been sultan twice already. First at 12, a puppet for scheming advisors, overthrown within 2 years. Too young, they said, too weak. His father Murad came back, ruled until he died, and left Mehmed to try again at 19. European courts mockingly call him the boy sultan. His own janissaries doubt him, these elite slave soldiers who can make or break Ottoman rulers. And everywhere he turns, in every military council, in every strategic decision, there's his father's ghost, Murad the Great, Mehmed the Conqueror. How do you step out of that shadow? Mehmed is short, stocky, with eyes that witnesses describe as burning. Intense, unsettling, he speaks 6 languages fluently. Studies Alexander the Great obsessively, sleeps with a copy of Arian's campaigns under his pillow like other men sleep with prayer books. He doesn't just want to conquer Constantinople, he wants to become Caesar, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but literally, actually, the legitimate Roman emperor. Because Constantinople isn't just a city to him, its legitimacy itself made stone, the capital of an empire that ruled the known world for 1,000 years. Take it and you become the heir to Augustus, to Constantine the Great himself. You become the bridge between ancient glory and modern power. Fail, and his short reign ends. 57 days of feeding 80,000 soldiers while the treasury bleeds gold. His advisors whisper about betrayal, about the impossibility of this siege. But there's something else growing in Mehmed's mind, something his battle-hardened generals don't see yet, don't understand. He isn't just planning a conquest, he's planning a transformation, a metamorphosis of empire itself. And that changes everything about what happens to the girl in the palace who has 57 days left before her world ends in fire and screams. May 28, 1453, one day before the end of everything. In the great palace, Theodora's mother is cutting her daughter's hair with kitchen shears. Rough cuts, uneven chunks falling to marble floors that once reflected the footsteps of emperors. Theodora sits perfectly still, watching black strands scatter across stone, each one a small death. Her mother's name is lost to history. The chronicles call her Lady Eupraxia, if they mention her at all. Right now her hands shake as she stains Theodora's fingers with kitchen soot, dresses her in coarse wool that scratches noble skin unused to such roughness. Noble women will be claimed as prizes, she whispers, her voice breaking. Servants might be overlooked. She doesn't say the rest, doesn't need to, doesn't have the words for what happens to beautiful young women when cities fall. Let them think you're worthless, she says, and begins to weep. That evening, in a move that shocks his commanders, Mem makes one final offer. Surrender now and everyone leaves safely. Constantine can rule the Peloponnese as an Ottoman vassal. No blood, no siege, no 3 days of horror. A messenger rides to the palace under a white flag. Constantine receives him wearing armor under his imperial robes. According to the chronicler Francis, who was there and survived to record it, the emperor's response is calm, dignified, absolute. To surrender the city is beyond my authority or anyone else's who lives in it, for all of us have decided to die of our own free will. The messenger rides back through gathering darkness. Mehmed's face shows nothing, but he gives the order immediately, final assault, dawn tomorrow. To rulers facing impossible choices, to men who cannot back down. One throne that only one of them will leave alive. If stories like this, of impossible choices and unexpected humanity hidden in history's darkest hours, matter to you, please hit that subscribe button. Because the past isn't simple. It's never been simple. And remembering that complexity, that uncomfortable truth, might be the most important thing we can do. These stories survive only if you help them survive. That night, the entire city flows toward the Hagia Sophia like blood toward a wound. Orthodox and Catholic, together for the first time in decades, their bitter theological hatreds forgotten in the face of extinction. Thousands pack the cathedral. Candles flicker against gold mosaics depicting Christ Pantocrator, the Almighty, staring down with Byzantine eyes at his terrified children. Voices rise in desperate prayer, in ancient hymns sung the same way for centuries. Theodora kneels among them in her disguise, unrecognizable now, just another servant girl in rough wool. Around her, old men weep. Men who remember when Constantinople had 300,000 citizens, when the city was the light of the world. Young mothers hold children who will never grow old, will never see manhood or womanhood, will be dead or enslaved before another sunrise. Outside, Ottoman drums begin their rhythm. Slow at first, then faster, louder, a heartbeat of violence approaching. 80,000 voices roar as one. Allahu Akbar, God is great. The chronicler Daukas wrote that the sound was so loud the earth itself seemed to answer back, seemed to tremble in response. Inside the Hagia Sophia, prayers falter for just a moment, then resume louder, more desperate, voices cracking with fear and faith intertwined. Theodora's lips move with the familiar words, but she's not praying anymore. She's memorizing the mosaics, the incense smell. Her mother's hand gripping hers so tight it hurts. This is the last moment of the world she knows, and some part of her young mind understands that completely. They return to the palace near midnight through empty streets, everyone barricaded, waiting for dawn. Theodora lies in darkness, listening to her mother breathe, listening to distant drums that never stop. Neither speaks. What is there to say when you're waiting for the world to end? May 29th, 1453, 1 o'clock in the morning. Three waves crash against those ancient walls like a human tide determined to drown stone itself. First, the irregulars, expendable troops, zealots and adventurers meant to exhaust the defenders, to blunt their arrows and tire their arms. They die by the hundreds, arrows, boiling oil, rocks hurled from battlements. More keep coming, trampling their own dead. Second wave, Anatolian regulars, disciplined, armored, methodical. The defenders are tired now, arms burning, running low on arrows, running low on strength and hope. Third wave, as the sky begins to lighten, the Janissaries, elite troops, the Sultan's personal guard, boys taken as children and trained for nothing but war. They don't charge wildly, they flow forward like still water, disciplined and unstoppable, and where they press against the walls, stone begins to crack. 5 o'clock in the morning, catastrophe. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander leading the entire defense, the man holding everything together, takes an arrow through his breastplate. He panics, screams for his men to carry him to his ships. When his Italian mercenaries see their commander fleeing, their tight formation shatters like glass. Just like that, professional soldiers who held this wall for 57 days of bombardment simply step back, lower their weapons, start looking desperately for ways out. The Ottomans smell blood in the air, press harder. Then someone notices the Kirkaporta gate, a small postern door, usually kept locked, that someone forgot to close after a nighttime sortie. An Ottoman soldier named Ulugh Hassan sees it first, rushes through with 30 men behind him. They raise the Ottoman crescent banner where Byzantine soldiers can see it. Enemy flags inside the walls, morale shatters completely. Men abandon their posts, running, looking for family, looking for boats, looking for anywhere that isn't here. Emperor Constantine XI sees it happening, sees his empire dissolving like morning mist. He tears off his imperial regalia, the purple that marks him as Caesar, and charges into the thickest fighting, shouting words that echo through history. The city has fallen and I am still alive. His body is never definitively identified. The last Roman emperor vanishes into the violence like smoke, like legend. By 8 o'clock in the morning, Ottoman soldiers pour through 6 breach points. The city that stood for 1100 years falls in 7 hours. What follows is one of the most brutal days in medieval history. Soldiers ransack every home methodically, street by street. Citizens barricaded inside are smoked out or burned alive in their own houses. Men cut down in streets still running with blood. Women and children rounded up like livestock, sorted by age and value. Between 30 and 50,000 people are enslaved that day, tagged and catalogued and distributed as property. The Hagia Sophia becomes a trap. Thousands fled there for sanctuary, believing in the ancient prophecy that angels would save the city at its darkest hour. Ottoman troops break down the bronze doors with axes, drag out priests mid-prayer, mid-liturgy, select the most valuable captives with practiced eyes. Beautiful women, strong young men, children who can be trained, molded, sold. The great palace falls by mid-morning. Ottoman soldiers burst through marble corridors where emperors once walked, tearing down crosses, smashing icons, hunting systematically for the imperial family. Some nobles choose suicide rather than capture. Others hide in cisterns, in cellars, in secret passages built centuries ago for exactly this nightmare. Theodora, still dressed as a kitchen servant, presses herself into a storage room behind amphora of olive oil, heart hammering so hard she's certain they'll hear it, listening to boots thunder past, to screams echoing through corridors where she once danced and studied and dreamed of futures that will never come. Hours pass in suffocating darkness. The frenzy becomes systematic, methodical. Eventually, inevitably, they find her. Her hands are too soft despite the soot, her voice too refined despite her terror. Kitchen dirt can't hide 15 years of court training, can't disguise noble bearing bred into bones. Noon, Sultan Mehmed II rides a white Arabian stallion through the Adrianople gates. Through walls his cannons finally broke. He proceeds directly to the Hagia Sophia, not to destroy it, but to claim it, to transform it. He dismounts, picks up a handful of dirt, and pours it ceremonially over his turban. An Islamic gesture of humility before God, he enters the 1,000-year-old cathedral, greatest church in Christendom, and declares simply, "This shall become a mosque." An imam recites the call to prayer. Christian sacred space becomes Muslim sacred space. The world shifts on its axis. But then Mehmed does something no one expected, something that makes his commanders exchange confused glances. He orders the pillaging stopped immediately. After only 1 day instead of the customary 3, soldiers grumble but obey, because he asks the Sultan, and they read Janissaries, and obedience is absolute. He announces that citizens hiding will not be harmed if they emerge. Former residents can return to their homes. Churches will be protected. Greek scholars will be welcomed into Ottoman service. He isn't just conquering a city. He's declaring himself something unprecedented, the legitimate Roman emperor, Caesar of a transformed empire. And emperors need subjects to rule, not corpses to bury and ruins to govern. His Grand Vizier compiles careful lists of captured nobility. Among them, a teenage girl found hiding in the palace, disguised as a servant, but identified by informers who knew the imperial household. Princess Theodora Pleiologina is brought to the throne room. The marble hall smells of smoke and copper. Shattered mosaics of Christ and the apostles crunch underfoot. Blood stains darken the floor in patterns like grotesque art. Mehmed sits on his portable throne, wearing white silk and an enormous turban with a jeweled brooch, deliberately echoing Roman imperial regalia, claiming legitimacy through symbols. Theodora is pushed forward roughly by guards. Still in her servant's clothing, still covered in soot, terrified beyond words, Ottoman protocol demands she prostrate herself before the Sultan. She stands frozen, unable to move, unable to think. Mehmed studies her in silence that stretches like torture. Then he speaks in perfect, aristocratic Greek. "You are of the Palaiologos line." A statement, not a question. She forces words through a throat tight with fear. "I am. Where is your father?" "Dead in the siege," she whispers. The throne room holds its breath. Every person present knows what should happen next. His commanders expect him to claim her as a concubine, standard practice, the right of conquest. The Byzantine attendants forced to witness this expect execution or brutal enslavement, an example made of imperial blood. Mehmed asks one more question, his tone neutral, calculating. "Can you read and write?" "Greek, Latin, and some Arabic," she answers, because what else can she say? Silence falls like a physical weight, then the unthinkable happens. Sultan Mehmed II orders Princess Theodora released. Not as a slave, not as a concubine to be used and discarded. As a free woman under state protection, he assigns her a stipend from the imperial treasury, a residence in the Fanner district, permission to practice Christianity openly in his new Muslim capital. The room erupts in confused whispers in multiple languages. This moment, this single decision in a blood-soaked throne room, is why this story was buried by both sides for centuries. Western chroniclers wanted tales of Ottoman brutality to fuel crusades and justify wars. Ottoman historians wanted tales of military triumph and religious conquest. Neither side wanted this. A 21-year-old conqueror showing calculated mercy that defied every rule of medieval warfare, every expectation of siege law. Princess Theodora lived under Ottoman protection for 3 years in Constantinople, part of a small Byzantine community that Mehmed deliberately preserved as living proof of his legitimacy as Roman emperor. She witnessed the transformation, mosques rising alongside churches, Greek scholars entering Ottoman service, translating texts, preserving knowledge, the Sultan establishing libraries and universities, building an empire rather than merely conquering territory. In 1456, she was permitted to leave for Moria in the Peloponnese, where remnants of the Byzantine Empire still flickered under Ottoman suzerainty. Later accounts, fragmentary and uncertain, suggest she married a minor noble, lived quietly until approximately 1480. died in obscurity but in freedom, which was more than tens of thousands of her fellow citizens could say. Her story was suppressed for different reasons by each side, buried under layers of convenient narrative. Western European chroniclers preferred simple tales of Ottoman brutality. Mercy complicated their calls for crusade. How do you rally Christian armies against an enemy who protects Christian princesses, who preserves churches, who acts like the Roman emperor he claims to be? Ottoman historians focus exclusively on Mehmed's military genius, his transformation of Constantinople into Istanbul. His protective policies toward Christians suggested uncomfortable complexity, political calculation that looked too much like compromise. Better to tell simple stories of conquest and conversion. But documents preserved in Ottoman archives tell the story both sides tried to forget. Mehmed's decrees protecting Byzantine nobility, his appointments of Christians to administrative posts, his preservation of Greek scholarship that would later fuel the Italian Renaissance. These reveal a ruler trying to build something unprecedented, not a religious state, but a cosmopolitan empire, Roman in structure, Islamic in faith, Greek in culture, Turkish in military strength. The irony is profound and disturbing. The conqueror, who destroyed the Byzantine Empire, also preserved its people more effectively than the Byzantine emperors themselves, who had spent centuries in civil wars, theological disputes, and economic collapse. Approximately 15,000 Greeks remained in Constantinople under protected status. They formed the basis of the Greek Phanariot community that would administer Ottoman Orthodox populations for 4 centuries, a ghost of Byzantium living inside the Ottoman Empire like a pearl in an oyster. Here's what haunts me about this story. What keeps me returning to it? We desperately want history to be simple. Monsters and heroes, victims and victors. Clean lines between good and evil that let us choose sides, judge clearly, feel righteous. But Theodora's survival, and the survival of thousands like her, reveals something more uncomfortable than brutality, more challenging than simple conquest. A 21-year-old sultan who permitted systematic slaughter could also show strategic mercy that saved thousands. A 15-year-old princess who should have been enslaved or killed walked free because a conqueror needed her survival more than her subjugation. What do we do with that? How do we hold both truths simultaneously? The screaming in the streets and the mercy in the throne room, the calculated brutality of siege warfare and the calculated mercy of imperial transformation. This is the history that makes us uncomfortable because it refuses to be simple, refuses to let us judge from comfortable distance. What do you think? Can mercy and brutality coexist in the same person, the same moment, the same conquest? Does strategic compassion count as compassion at all? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation matters. Sometimes the most important thing history can teach us isn't about the past at all. It's about recognizing complexity in the present, about understanding that human beings are capable of both unspeakable cruelty and unexpected grace, sometimes in the same breath. The marble in that throne room was warm with blood? Yes, but it was also the floor where mercy walked when no one expected it. And that contradiction, uncomfortable as it is, might be the truest thing history has to teach us.